Today, a U.S. warship brought down an Iranian drone in the Strait of Hormuz.
Tehran says the video contradicts the U.S. timeline of the event.
We've just learned that a British tanker has been seized.
A lot has been happening between the U.S. and Iran, and it's moving so quickly that more will probably have happened by the time that you see this. To understand how we got here, we need to go back in time to when the Trump administration pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal and examine the ripple effects of that day. After pulling out of the Iran nuclear deal, the Trump administration imposed sweeping sanctions.
We will be instituting the highest level of economic sanction.
And President Trump says they have fundamentally changed Iran's behavior.
They were involved with everything. Now they're pulling back because they've got serious economic problems. They're not doing that anymore. They're doing very poorly as a nation. They're trying to bring soldiers back home because they can't pay them.
Some experts disagree with the president's assessment. So what's going on here? Has the administration's strategy worked?
We will apply unprecedented financial pressure on the Iranian regime.
I am here to tell you today, President Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran is working.
This maximum pressure campaign has meant a lot of sanctions.
The case by those within the Trump administration who've been supporting this maximum pressure campaign is that if you hit Iran hard, they will in fact seek a practical way to get out from under the pressure that they're facing.
Pompeo said the sanctions would end when Iran met 12 demands that go beyond the severe restrictions on its nuclear energy program, including a requirement that Iran stop its development of ballistic missiles and cease supporting armed groups that bolster its agenda elsewhere in the Middle East. In other words, Iran would have to stop supporting its proxies. But that hasn't happened. To understand why economic pressure hasn't stopped Iran from supporting its proxies, you have to understand that since the 1979 revolution, Iran has seen proxies as key to their national security.
So there is a real imbalance in terms of conventional military capability between Iran and its neighbors in the region. In order to compensate for these shortcomings, the Iranians have developed two defensive strategies. One is their ballistic missile program, and the other one is their regional policy.
And a key part of that regional strategy is funding militias, rebels, and political organizations in its neighboring countries. Iran has significant ties to Hezbollah, a Shia political party and militia in Lebanon, and has leveraged those ties to intervene in Syria on Assad's behalf. Islamic Jihad and Hamas in Gaza are backed by Iranian funding. Iran has also funded powerful Shiite political and militia forces in Iraq. When Saudi Arabia became involved in the conflict in Yemen, Iran began backing the Houthi rebels to counter the kingdom's influence. This support can be as hands-off as extending a line of credit or as involved as sending an arm of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to train fighters and supply weapons. That all costs money, and so the logic behind the administration's strategy is straightforward enough.
What they're saying with maximum pressure is if we dry up the money, then they won't have the money to finance their proxies the way they have. An example being, they have been giving Hezbollah in Lebanon about $800 million a year. The estimates I've seen are that the $800 million has been reduced to about $500 million. No indication whatsoever that Hezbollah is stopping any of its bad behavior. Quite the contrary.
Here's the thing. Since the 1979 revolution, there's almost no correlation between the periods of economic growth or decline and Iran's increases or decreases in funding its proxies.
There is a 4-decade-long track record of Iran's economic performance and 4-decade-long track record of Iran's support for proxies and partners in the region. And if you put them side by side, you quickly realize that there's actually not much correlation between the two. You look at specific periods in time, for instance, end of Iran-Iraq war, when the Iranian economy was really in a difficult situation. You look at the sanctions under the Obama administration, when again Iran lost half of its oil revenue overnight. So their last dollar will go to Hezbollah and to Hamas and to other groups, the same way that the last dollar in the United States will probably go to the Pentagon.
At this point, the sanctions haven't cut off Iran's ability to fund proxies. But that doesn't mean the maximum pressure strategy hasn't had an impact. To start, short, the Iran nuclear deal is beginning to collapse. Iran has started stockpiling more than 300 kilograms of low-enriched uranium and enriching it beyond 3.67% purity. Neither puts Iran anywhere close to a nuclear weapon, which it says it has no interest in building, but both are forbidden under the deal.
By beginning to walk away from some of their own obligations under the nuclear deal, it then gives them something to trade.
That's not all. Iran has shown increasing signs of aggression in the region. When the administration withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal and reinstated sanctions on Iran's oil exports, it also issued temporary waivers to several countries, allowing them to keep importing Iranian oil. In late April, the Trump administration announced it would not renew those waivers.
Today, I'm announcing that we will no longer grant any exemptions. We're going to zero across the board.
And that was the turning point. Iran shifted from waiting out the Trump administration to what seems like direct action. Here's what happened.
The waivers were ended as of May 4th. On May 5th, John Bolton, the National Security Advisor, announced that we had intelligence that the Iranians were planning attacks against our forces and our interests in the region. In this same time frame, you then had tankers that had limpet mines attached to their hulls and they were blown up. Then you had an American drone that was shot down.
Since then, the US says it downed an Iranian drone, 2 more tankers have been seized by Iran, and Iran claims to have arrested US spies.
There's essentially a big game of chicken that's going on between these two sides. The Iranians are testing to see whether we're going to jump first.
In other words, as the US adds economic pressure, Iran is pushing back, showing aggression, continuing to fund its proxies, and ramping up their nuclear program. So the regime has changed its behavior, just not in the way that President Trump claims.